If I had a business that I wanted to, if I was the founder of a business that I wanted to sell, exit in say 3, 5, 7 years, this is what I would do today that most founders overlook because you're in the minutia. There's things you have to do, right? You have to have a recurring revenue stream. You have to have a mix of anchor clients. And I'll talk about that in other videos. You have to have a team. But how do you also make it easier to exit and get opportunities that will come to you that you don't even that might not even be things that you have thought of? Okay, so the answer is being of value in your industry. Okay, so that doesn't mean customers, it means competitors. Connect, get to know, build relationships with not only people who are bigger in your industry, also people that are smaller. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples depending on depending on how this video goes. So here's an example because the first couple of businesses that I sold, and I say I have 5 exits. I've actually sold more businesses than that, but the first 2 or 3 businesses, I think 2 businesses that I sold were through, I used an investment banker. Okay. That worked well, but it was really expensive. I'm not saying don't use an investment banker. This was, I'm talking like $28 million deal. That one, it was my first deal. So that was valuable. The second deal, I don't think it was worth it. It wasn't a huge exit. We ended up paying like $250,000 to the investment banker. Could have done that on our own, which I learned and used for further deals. So in my example, I owned a staffing agency and I got to a point where I brought in some other people on my management team. I wanted to sell the company. I wanted to sell it to them. I wanted to sell off a separate division of the company. That was the deal that we worked out. So in other words, I had a company to sell and I got involved. I had been retired for a little bit, and so it was getting back into the industry. And so what I did was I built relationships with giants in the industry. Like I had a small business. Our business was $35 million. And so what I did was, this was a staffing business, and I showed up. Our industry group at the time, I think it still is, it was the Staffing Industry Analyst, the SIA. There was another one that was the ASA. I don't know if they're still around, but the ASA was more like, I'm going to say like a little bit like not as senior level. The SIA were those were the C-level people in giant, like the biggest companies in the world, like Adecco, Manpower, Kelly. And so what I did is I got involved. I started meeting people and building relationships. I offered to speak where I could provide value. So I even got free access to conferences. I also attended, like at the time, one of our vendors was Career Builder, and they would throw these like huge boondoggles, and I would go. And I mean, do you think that I wanted to be out like drinking and we did like cooking lessons and bars and stuff in Chicago until like 2 a.m? No, like I'm not, that's not really what I want to do. A lot of people do, but so I did it because I knew what my end goal was, and I knew that I wanted to meet people in my industry. And by doing that, I was able to sell the business, like literally from these connections that I made. And I'll tell you the story. So I had brought on a COO. And so there was a deal that we had to make a deal to generate more cash in the business. We didn't really have, like, the business was really cash poor at the time. This is a business that I had taken over for better or for worse. But anyway, I was there and needed to sell a division of this business. And so we didn't really have the extra money to go off and have me travel, but we did need to bring in cash, and we were going to sell a division of our business. That was our plan in order to generate the cash that we needed in the business. And then I made a deal, and then I exited that business. But sorry, that was really complicated. So what happened was I'd been attending events. I went to this career builder event in Chicago. I was so tired. I was like, I think I had a cold. Like back then we'd still, bid things when we were kind of sick. Oh my gosh. I was like practically on death's door. And I was in this like boondoggle in Chicago. Like it was insane. Like, I did hold my own boundaries too, because those things can get pretty crazy. But I was just, making connections with people. And so I came home, and then, and that was like, so several months later, there was an SIA event in Miami, and I was in LA then. So like crazy far flight, super expensive. It was at the Fontainebleau, which I guess I probably didn't need to stay there. I probably could have stayed somewhere else, but wanted to be where the people were, where the action was. Because a lot of stuff happens in between, which is actually, this is what happened. So my COO at the time had said, you can't go, like, we can't go to Miami because we can't afford it. And I looked at him and I said, we're going to sell this. It was the VMS division. That was the division that another story for another time. But I said, we're going to sell the VMS division in Miami. He was like, oh, like we're going. Like, I know we can't afford it, but we're going. So flew our butts from LA. Flew our butts from LA to Miami. And we had already decided that we're going to sell this division. I think we had some conversations. And by this point, because I knew people, I had like a whole yellow legal pad of people I knew, and I had started making calls. So we already had some people. It was actually his dad who was on our board. It was a long story, but he was former chairman of one of the biggest staffing company in the world. And they had brought in some people too who were interested in buying the business. So we go to Miami, and I'm at some like garden party. There was the Fontainebleau, by the way, is amazing. so I'm at this at this like party on the cocktail reception on the grass, and this guy comes up to me. He's like, "Oh, we met at the career builder, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "What are you up to?" And I tell him like who I had brought in, like this business partner, which I don't think I would have been able to do had I not been out there networking. I'm not going to name the person's name, but he was like, "How did you even manage that?" And then he's like, and I said, "Well, and then, this is the other thing we're doing, and we're actually selling our VMS division." And he goes, "Oh, really? Because my firm is working with, he owned a staffing business." And he said, I'm working with a PE firm who's buying me, and we're figuring out like how we're going to build out our VMS division, or if we're going to buy another company. Okay. So they ended up buying us. So that would have never happened, like literally never happened. This was not an enormous exit. It was $1 million. And it was, something that we had to sell off. It never happened had I not showed up and consistently showed up. So that's, not too bad, $1 million from a couple of events and some, and making other connections, like lifelong connections from doing that. I have a friend who owns a company where he is a managed service company. He has subscriptions where he helps businesses by, he used to be a Salesforce implementer. He did Sugar CRM before that, implementer. And then he started buying other Salesforce implementation companies. But then he moved to a subscription model, like hugely, like crazy expanded his business, because you need recurring revenue. You can't really sell a business. Like if you're in recruitment, if you're just doing direct hire, it's really hard to sell a business if you don't have a recurring revenue model, like an RPO or a staffing model. But if you're just doing like plug-in, unless you're like huge and really well, have a really big brand name, then it's really hard to do that. But anyway, so he moved from this like implementation one and done to subscription services and started buying all these companies. Well, I mean, who's he going to buy? Like, obviously he can hire a broker to look at companies, but having relationships, like companies, people he knew who were running companies, like those were the first people that he looks at to buy their businesses. Another business I had was a clothing business, and it for me that was a failure for me. That was a financial failure. Inventory was for in the business model that I chose. I was whatever, like founder story failure, totally in over my head as far as inventory. It was new to me, but hey, I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, I move on. But when I went to, I decided I was going to close the business. And so instead of just closing it, I wanted to see if I could sell it. I had about 300 people who were selling the clothing. So there were people involved. I obviously wanted to get some kind of financial gain or even like recuperation from selling it. And so took out the yellow notepad again, like I did before, called everyone. I started by and I knew people because I had a direct sales model, social selling, MLM. Don't love it, but I did it. And so I would get involved in like Direct Selling Alliance, that's like the kind of the same type of thing as the SIA that I mentioned. So I got to meet other owners. And by the way, like that's going to help in building your business anyway. Like you're going to meet people who are like I met the CEO and got to know the CEO of 31 Gifts. And they're like, if you don't know them, they were at the time a $35 million company. Actually, no, they were bigger. I think they may have even been like $100 million company. But I got to, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to get to know these people. So at that time when I was winding down with Winnie and Kat, I had pulled out my legal pad, and I was able to call people in the business. And every time I called somebody, and if they said no, I said, who else should I call? And they give me names, right? So, and I did end up selling it to a smaller company. Actually, I had never heard of them, but by calling, just picking up the phone and calling, being like, hey, I'm wrapping this down. Wrapping it up. I had another offer from a company called Ruby Ribbon, and they were a lot bigger. Would not have been able to do that had I not had some kind of a relationship with other people in my industry. So, moral of this video is, if you are looking to build your company to sell it, build relationships now with people in your industry, whatever stage you're at, right? Like you might be, the best time to start networking is when you start the company. The next best time is today, because obviously you can't go back. So drop in any questions, and feel free to book a call with me if you want to chat more about how to grow your business, create a recurring revenue model, and do all the things in your business that you need to have if your plan is to exit your business. I'm Diane Prince, and I have had 5 exits under my belt. I've had over $300 million in revenue. I think it's more like 500 million, but I try to underestimate, I guess. But anyway, and over 2,000 hires. I've been doing this for over 25 years. So I speak from experience, not just what coach speak or whatever, consultant speak. So anyway, let me know if you want to chat and see how I can help you individually with your goals in your business and getting it on track to be able to exit and to sell.